I have a deep love in my heart for Dolly Parton. Um, and whatever, maybe it's a tired thing, but I, among thousands of other people, love the song Jolene. So when Lil Nas X covered Jolene, I screamed, fell to the floor in tears of joy, listened to it on repeat, and thought to myself, the heavens have opened up. Has anybody else listened to the song?
The heavens. I have not heard Lil Nas X's cover of it, but I would like to add that I have listened to his entire Montero album, and it is Chef's Kiss.
Oh,
fantastic.
See, and I haven't listened to the entire album. I've only listened to the cover.
I find his album satisfactory. But all of his anything that's like top 40 stuff, I just love. And I have not heard Jolene yet.
It's like, I would describe it as like it's like a soulful. I think that I read a review where it was called Haunting. I read another review that said something about like it's what was it? An anthem for the gays.
You've been reading reviews on one song.
She said it was a religious experience.
And cried and soiled herself. It was a whole thing. Like, of course.
Yeah. Also, for people who know the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 5. Wow. I'm an Enneagram 5, which means that I just spend way too much time. I'm a glutton for like information. So when I like a thing or I want to know, or there's like something that has grabbed my mind or my heart, I just need to know everything about it.
Yeah.
So I straight up Google Lil Nas X Jolene, enter, click news, and then I'm just like reading all of it.
I get it. I really
I know what I'm gonna do after this. I'm gonna eat dinner and listen to Jolene.
Yeah, you are.
I'm excited.
Yes, you are.
I've got a few like of the covers of that song in my head. Like Dolly, it's hard to beat Dolly in anything, right?
Totally.
Just this massive figure of American music, right?
Yeah.
The next iteration of that song I think I ever heard was Jack White.
You
ever heard that one?
Yep.
Of the White Stripes.
Yeah.
Which was good and interesting, but sort of like a new dynamic, right? A straight guy,
right,
singing to a woman, "Don't take my man." Then there was Miley Cyrus.
Also a religious experience.
I thought that was good.
I loved that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. We're gonna go on a Jolene trip after this.
Oh yeah.
You highly recommend.
Well, and Miley and Lil Nas X have a connector in her father.
Old Town Road.
Yes.
Yeah, Billy Ray.
The country music powers that be refused to let that song on the country music list because they're racists. And so Billy Ray Cyrus said, well, let's just do the song together. And then they can't say it's not country. And they did. And then it made it to #1.
Yeah.
Billy Ray Cyrus was my first tape as a kid. Achy Breaky Heart.
Achy Breaky
Oh my
Heart.
gosh, I love this game. What was your first?
My tape. Like it was not CD land yet.
There's cassette tape.
Full disclosure, my uncle owned the music writing group that song is from. My uncle Russ Zavitson. Yeah.
Wow.
So he and Billy Ray are tight.
Have you hung out with Billy Ray Cyrus?
No, I'm dying to meet Miley too, and it just none of that's happened. And all my family's like, "Oh yeah, well, I love Miley," and I'm like, "What the fuck?
Love Miley."
I want to love Miley. When do I get to meet Miley?
Oh shit.
Wait, so when you said tape, you literally mean cassette tape, Katie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Like wound it up when the tape pulled out accidentally with the pencil. Yeah,
Oh.
that one.
I don't remember cassette. I couldn't tell you what my first cassette tape was. Probably like something Teddy Ruxpin, but which was like a toy way back in the day that had a little cassette player in the back, and then his mouth would move and he would do like little things that we'd probably call creepy. Like Ted kind of looks like Teddy Ruxpin, if for anybody who's seen Ted. But I do remember my first CDs and this brings us full circle in this conversation because one of them includes a very famous Dolly Parton cover that became more famous than Dolly Parton's, which is I Will Always Love You. The Bodyguard is one of my first CDs. I got a CD player for my 5th grade promotion to 6th grade. And my first 2 CDs were the Janet album and the Bodyguard soundtrack. And that's where my CD, but I do not remember cassettes because they were just so ubiquitous when I was born.
This is how we do it, Montel Jordan.
Oh my God, yeah. Another classic.
I had a zip-tied Walkman to the front of my bike, and I would put my headphones on.
This is how we do it. I saw him live. Oh, right. Should we talk about the news of the day?
Oh, shit.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah,
we should start the show. Yeah, that's
fine. Going. I was going to keep it.
We have an elected official.
We were playing 6 Degrees of Dolly Parton, and I was here for it. But
I'm down
maybe
for
we
that.
should do the show.
I was going to try to get Montel Jordan all the way back to Dolly Parton, but that's all right. Let's talk about the news.
All right.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
And Katie.
And Councilmember Valenzuela. Woo-hoo! How you doing today, Katie?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Very last minute, but obviously a lot happened this week, so we're excited to have you on. Obviously, listeners, you can tell we do not have Skylar on. Skylar, as always, is out doing Skylar things.
I do a lot on social media. He's very busy.
Yeah. You got to keep them busy. You got to, good trouble. Yeah. So, obviously, I think today we want to talk about some of the sweeps we've been seeing in the region against some of our neighbors, unhoused neighbors, and homeless camps, really all throughout the city. But under some different jurisdictions. Interestingly, if it's under a freeway, then the jurisdiction, I think, is Caltrans and California Highway Patrol. In other spaces, jurisdiction is, straight up city. I don't know if we'll be discussing anything on county property today, but that stuff, those sweeps happen regularly. But let's just start with, I think, probably the first sort of very jarring, one of the most jarring sweeps, footage of a sweep that I've seen locally in a very long time. On Tuesday, September 28th, the Twitter account for SAC Red Meals, they do great community with mutual aid work. A lot of food distribution, a lot of other types of distribution that other folks aren't doing. They're really cool. They shot a video of I believe it was the city, and stop me if I'm wrong there, sweeping an encampment of dozens and dozens of people that was very well established, and it was a community by this point. In Councilmember Eric Guerra's district, that's District 6 here in Sacramento. And it came out later after they showed this video that the tent in question at the very beginning of the video that was just being bulldozed, it was being just torn down, was owned by a woman named Becky. It was her 94th birthday, and she had been told by folks in that area that she could stay there as long as she didn't let as long as she, agreed not to let folks throw trash and refuse over a fence. All of this is to say, very jarring, very angering. We've talked about this multiple times before. Shannon, can you just, as someone who's been working on the front lines in homelessness services for over a decade and a half, can you just talk about the effect that it might have on folks?
I mean, I think it's important to remember, first off, that the experience of homelessness, like just the experience alone, is traumatizing, right? It means that a person is living in a constant state of crisis, a constant like survival mode. Thriving is just like not something that happens in that space. And that a person is impacted in so many different ways, right? Like their mind, their body, their mental health, their spiritual health, all of those parts of themselves are impacted by this trauma. They're living in a constant fear that something like this will happen, and then it does. And it really just turns a person's world upside down. And this is just, from the stories that I hear from folks, it's where the question is always like, where do you want me to go? Or where do they want me to go? Like when I'm, having conversations with folks whose camps have been rousted or swept, like what is the end goal here? Because there is nowhere else to turn, right? And the resources that are available are not viable resources. And we know that to be true because we watch council meetings where the reports are still, we're working on it. We know, as people who are folks who are advocating and folks who are working on the front lines, we have a difficult time trying to get people connected to resources. So really, what this does is it just like yanks a person into a space of frustration and hopelessness and anger and, even further crisis. And it's all valid.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're saying that sort of upending someone's entire life like that, it drives them deeper into the crisis of homelessness and further away from the especially for some folks when they have so many hurdles to jump in a time and place when we have so little affordable housing. It just makes it that much harder for them to ever start down that pathway towards being housed again, right?
Yeah, and I think, it's hard for housed folks, I think, who are unable to activate their radical empathy to hold the space that is like able to recognize what the absence of consistency means for a person. But this really, for folks experiencing homelessness, in so many ways, their encampments are the only consistent thing that they have. And when the city comes in and violently takes that away with no alternative in place, they are perpetuating incredible harm that is not only harmful in the moment, but it's harm that is going to stay with a person for years to come because that harm is trauma.
Absolutely. I'm reminded of, last fall we were having, the sweeps obviously have been something that have been happening on an ongoing basis for a really long time, but there were some sweeps that were happening on Stockton Boulevard because of some of the negotiation happening between the person who owned that property and the city. And there was a little bit of like well, if you all won't let me build my gas station in Natomas on that property, then I'm gonna, I'm not gonna be as accommodating, right, to the people who have been living on this other property. And so as Thanksgiving was approaching, they started, doing these sweeps. And when I was out there, just, visiting neighbors, just wanting to see like what was going on. And I was asking people, do you know what's going on? And one of the men that I spoke with said, no, some days I leave and I go to work and I come back here and my stuff is gone and things are gone. Like no one has said to us what's going on. And so I started explaining to him, well, the person who owns this property also owns this lot in Natomas. And he wanted, to get this gas station going. And you all are kind of being used as a pawn in this. And he let people, stay here over the summer because he was hoping that was going to win him some favor with the city. And then when it didn't, here's what's happening, right? And he was like, thank you so much. Like nobody has come and even said to us, like, why is this happening? When do we have to be gone? Like he was like, I would have taken my stuff with me had I known I was going to come home to nothing. Nobody said anything. And so I think the other piece of this that is often unrecognized is that for a lot of people, they are not reading the Sacramento Bee. They are not on Twitter. They are not getting the heads up and the notification that other people are getting about what might be going on. And so they don't have any context. They just come home and their stuff is gone. And to add to the disorientation is like, I don't know what happened. I don't know why it happened. I don't know when it's going to happen again. And that's just really like, it's not a way to treat people. It doesn't show dignity and respect to people that these are fully formed human beings who deserve to have, advance notice of what is happening and a reason for why.
And I think that I think the advance notice even has to be unpacked a little bit, because the notice that is given traditionally in cases like this are these like neon pieces of paper that are stapled or taped or safety pinned to tents. And it really is, it goes to show the absence of like cultural sensitivity when it comes to working with people experiencing homelessness. Because one is that piece of paper going to survive the weather of being outside? Is it going to survive foot traffic, people just walking back and forth and potentially like going through other people's encampments? Can a person read? Is a person healthy enough to be able to see clearly? Do they have all of their, like, is their executive function intact? Are their mental faculties all there? So that's where it's so important to have that sort of like that compassionate care and that human-centered approach. I mean, it's something that we say on the show all the time, the human-centered approach to addressing the crisis of homelessness and making sure that the right steps are taken to help people along. Like that is what's really important. Yeah. It's not just, you can't just cite people with your everyday piece of paper.
Can I incorporate? Go, Katie.
Well, no, I was just going to say, and in this case, well, in all cases, right? I mean, we're supposed to, and I ask these questions during council meetings because I like getting things on the record. And, I ask about, what different rules mean. And it's supposed to be, if you're blocking right of way, we're supposed to try to work with you to get you to shift your stuff so people can pass, right? If you're on private property, obviously that's a different thing. And then if you're on public property, unless we have an alternative for you, that's it. We're going to try to manage your trash. We're going to try to get you what you need, but that's all that happens. And so when stories like this pop up, it feels so preventable. Like, it's my understanding that I don't think the Department of Community Response, DCR, even knew that this was happening. And so like, it raises all these questions for me where I'm like, what is the point of investing in these systems and bringing on people with that experience, with that sensitivity, if we're not going to work with them to try to manage a situation, whatever happened at that site, which I don't know. I mean, they didn't even know. And so we're not even using the one tool that we have in our tool bag, which isn't even that robust, to be able to try to see, hey, if there's a problem here, let's try to work with folks to manage it, because they're people and, they want a stable place to be, just like we want them to be okay. So that part, I have a lot of questions. It's not in my district, so I don't get to always get those answers, but it's a question that I have that I want to continue raising with our team.
When we talk about these sweeps, obviously these are unconstitutional. We do not have enough shelter or extremely affordable housing in the region to accommodate our thousands and thousands of folks who are currently unhoused in Sac County. So it's in direct violation of Boise versus Martin. which says that if there are not enough beds in the region, you cannot criminalize the act of camping in public spaces. This is cruel and unusual punishment. It is a violation of your Eighth Amendment right. And so, you know, the same arguments that we had last spring are springing up again. And I think a lot of questions go around saying, who do we talk to about this? Who is to blame? And when the LA Times came and asked us about this, my response was, there's plenty of onus to go around here. And, you know, Howard Chan, the city manager, does not get away with this just because he's a bureaucrat, right?
Right.
Daryl Steinberg, the mayor, he says a lot of really nice things. The buck does stop with him. And he said that before, not only that he is the homeless czar for the state, right? Our mayor. Chief Daniel Hahn, you know, he runs the police force that carries out these violent acts against our unhoused community. And then, of course, Eric Guerra, this is his district. It's hard to imagine that something like this goes down without him giving the green light. And this man wants to be a state senator. And all of these folks have to answer for something like this. Sorry, I got a little ranty. I just wanted to lay out the Boise thing.
Yeah, well, and I won't make excuses for anybody, but I will say that I think I have had things happen in my district that I wasn't always aware of, which does surprise me, you know, where I'll drive by an area that has traditionally had encampments and they're gone. And you're kind of like, okay, did they go on their own? Did they get into services or were they moved? And sometimes I'm able to track down information. A lot of times I'm not, because it kind of turns into well, I don't know, check with code. Well, I don't know, check with PD. Well, I don't know, DCR. And everyone's saying, well, gee, we don't know where these people went that were in your district for years. And so, you know, I think in some cases, council members are involved, and we can talk about that with our other cases that are happening. But in other cases, I think sometimes these decisions are getting made and they're thinking we might just not notice, which is why we really rely on community advocates letting us know. Because then at that point, if you don't say anything, if you don't do anything, then you are complicit. And that's a different bundle of sticks altogether.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's talk about one that happened here in District 4 on Wednesday, September 29th. This was on W and 9th Streets, just under Highway 50, right? I actually didn't even know about this until a few hours before we recorded this. Yeah. But there was another sweep. Dozens of people got rousted, their belongings were taken. There was one man, Maurice Bold, I believe his name was, who was woken up, and he said that a cop, he said sheriff, which I think he meant sheriff's deputy, but I think it probably was Highway Patrol, California Highway Patrol, said to him, "This isn't your playground anymore," as if it's not his home. That's not the, you know, where he spent the last 6 months of his life, trying to rebuild, right? And they barely gave him time to get his shoes, to get his mom's ashes. This man was crying as he was trying to do this, right? And he was one of dozens of people who had to move, and was forced to move. Talk to us a little through this. When I saw the story, I think it was through ABC 10, the onus on those stories was on the Highway Patrol and Caltrans. This is also technically your district.
Yeah. And I mean, to give some context here, since I first came into office, we engaged Caltrans really early because we had a few camps on their property and we wanted to figure out how we can help them. How do we work together to get these folks what they need, either bathroom access, you know, safe spaces, what have you. That's when the WX thing came on our radar. Hey, where are these 300 tents going to go? Which led to the safe ground here where the sweep happened. And we told them then several things. You know, we demonstrated to them that we were willing to help. you know, like if there was an issue with the camp, that we were willing to work with them to get them vouchers, to get people to do outreach, to help them relocate if they needed to move away from a specific site. Like we demonstrated that. I literally at one point during the WX relocation to the safe ground was standing at a U-Haul at 10 a.m. on a Sunday with PJ with my personal credit card, renting him a van so that he could go out and help people get their stuff to move it down. So we really made a point to them and did the work to say, look, we are willing to work with you. We know these camps are on your property, but we've got to have a place for folks to go, and we want to partner with you on this. And so since that happened back in April, so, you know, it's been several months, and that conversation has continued from our side, where we keep saying, hey, we want to work with you. We want to figure this out. We want to figure out 29th Street and W Street. How do we help these folks? We know they're in a dangerous spot. We've seen people wander into traffic. We know that there's high-speed cars going by, that there's a lot of issues with water access and all of that. And so we're like, we want to help with these camps, and never really got anything from them for months, right? It's been months that we've been calling, and I've gotten to the point where I've told constituents nearby, right? Like, you need to call Caltrans and tell them to work with us because we can't do anything on their property, and we know there's an issue that we need to address. So fast forward to yesterday, I find out on Twitter. I get sent a link by Skylar, and I click on it, and I look at this video of a bulldozer, and I immediately recognize where it is on W Street. And so today I was gearing up for some phone calls.
Today for listeners was Thursday, September 30th. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gearing up for some phone calls when I got another email, which we'll talk about, but we were never notified. And we were never given an opportunity to do outreach over there. We were never given an opportunity. I don't even know why that camp was moved specifically. I know there's been some concerns with folks coming to those camps to engage in criminal activity like dealing or what have you. But like, I mean, we didn't have a place for those folks to go. And so I assumed that before we ever said, hey, you got to go, that there'd be some effort at either identifying why or trying to move them someplace or figure out some way to do this. And what I was told by the Caltrans person I spoke to today is, well, you didn't have any place for them either. And I said, we just adopted a siting plan, right? With 20 sites, and at least 3 of those sites are Caltrans sites. So like, you're telling me that you couldn't have called us, and if there was a like, we couldn't have worked with you on, we've been trying to work with you on getting these sites open so that we can get people someplace safer. Like, why wouldn't you even ask us? And he kind of went, oh. And I kid you not, I'm like, so you didn't even like call us to say, hey, we've got a problem here. How can we open these sites earlier? What's your bandwidth? Can you help us move these folks someplace where they're safe? Whatever the issue was, they didn't even let us know. And so what we saw of that sweep, I mean, that story that you just told from Maurice, that's horrifying. And I think there's so many ways that I wish this sort of willful ignorance that happens with an agency like Caltrans that's so frustrating, because it's like, it was in the LA Times, for crying out loud, what we did with them on WX, right? It's just like, you know that we're good partners in this, like, and we're not funded for this. They fund the county, and they fund like SAC Steps Forward to do this stuff, but we weren't even contacted. And I think that was a real missed opportunity, because we've been trying to get them to do it right with us for months. And then suddenly they went out and did a sweep. And I still have no explanation as to who made that call or why it had to happen the way it did.
Yeah. How, a number of, I think, folks were sort of waiting for you to speak out on this. And so, I mean, I'd like to give you a chance to do that now, Yeah. On top of that, I think people yeah, I think you're mad alongside us. You probably have more recourse than the rest of us do to push back on something like that. So I guess it's sort of a two-parted question. Can you speak to the folks who were asking, what was your response to this and waiting for it? And then can you also speak to what can be done and what you and your office are doing?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we didn't find out about this. I didn't find out about this till late last night. And so we put out a statement today. You know, part of what I was trying to do was figure out what the heck happened, who made the call, you know, why was the city contacted? I mean, because that's a whole nother bundle of sticks, right? It's just like, were we contacted and did just not get to us? Like, I wanted to make sure I was pointing the finger at the right entity. And so, you know, when I found out that, yeah, Caltrans made a call and went out with CHP and swept a bunch of folks, then a statement went out that I felt in my terms is pretty strongly worded given, but it was also pretty measured given how I was feeling on the inside. Because by the time I finished conversations with folks, I was pretty dang frustrated because I do have some recourse, right? I can speak publicly and I can do this, but at the same time, I don't have recourse. I can't make Caltrans and CHP do it differently. All I can do is stand out there like I have been today and saying, this is wrong. You can't just move people without giving them a place to go. Like, this is not right. All you're doing is pushing them. And what's ironic and sad is that literally what happened today, because they were continuing to move people further down W Street leading up to the safe ground, they were getting closer to 8th Street, is that they were moving right across the street to in front of these residential homes. So ironically, some of the same folks who've been telling us move these tents, move these tents, move these tents, were now calling us to say, wait a minute, now somebody's on my front yard. And like, what are you going to do about that? And I say, this is what happens. Sweeps don't solve the problem. All the sweeps do is move somebody from one location to another and traumatize them and hurt them in the process. It's not a solution to the issues we all want to solve. It's a waste of money and it's hurtful. So we've been having a lot of those conversations today with constituents, but really trying to push Caltrans to say it's irresponsible for them not to even try to work with the local jurisdiction to give us enough warning, to give us the resources to figure out how we can relocate folks if a relocation is necessary in a safe and humane way, and ideally to shelter or to housing. So, you know, that was the big part of that, was just trying to figure out this morning what the heck was going on and who made the call. And then this afternoon, it's been a lot of phone calls and emails between myself, because there's other things happening as well that we'll talk about to try to stop it. So,
Do you know who made the call?
It was Caltrans District 3 director who made the call. That's what I know. So the person who heads up Caltrans District 3 decided that it needed to happen. I'm not sure why.
Do we know their name? I was looking for it on their website. I couldn't find it.
Amarjeet. Amarjeet, I think his last name Benapal is how you say it.
Okay.
So yeah, his information's online. He's the District 3 director, but that's what I was told, was that he's the one who issued the directive to his staff to do this, and that they weren't sure why he was unavailable today. So it's so that's what I landed on, was, okay, you made the call. None of the city team knew that this was happening at this timeline. You never gave us any opportunity to try to work with folks and to try to see if we can get them someplace else safely or open a site more quickly. So this is the recourse. And so I'll talk more about it with the other sites, because it's today was already happening, and we were trying to call folks to say, like, can you stop? And they were like, oh, it's too late. It's already going on. And I'm like,
you had to be reactive.
You can't call people, like, you can't get a hold of these folks and say, like, hey, go ahead and stop now, like, back off. We need to figure this out. So yeah.
So beyond the director, he does have a few PR people who are probably more accessible, who speak for him. One of them is Deanna Shoopman, who is the Chief Public Information Officer for District 3 of Caltrans. And the other one, who has been quoted pretty extensively throughout the news on this one, is Angela DePrato, who's a PIO for a press rep for them for this area. We'll be sharing their contact info if you want to reach out to them, listeners. Any other questions on that, Shannon, Flo?
I don't think so.
I would just want to add that I think the most heartbreaking thing for me about what happened today at W Street, is that, I mean, a lot of these were folks who were moving there because they were trying to be close to safe ground. And, they were trying to be close to places they could access restrooms so that they aren't, using this, doing their business on the street. These were folks that were trying to get close to trash support and shelter. And that, I mean, it breaks my heart in all circumstances, but especially it's like here we took a bunch of folks that were trying to move closer to the only place in the city where they can get some level of emergency support. and we did this to them, and that just adds insult to injury, I think.
It's devastating. I live right by this spot, and I was walking through downtown where I live today, and I was like struck by just like, oh, there's a lot more unhoused folks around today, and a higher number who seem to be going through some sort of trauma. And I didn't know what it was. And then when I heard about this, I was like, oh, well, of course.
Well, and that's the thing is like, I get so many emails, and I probably have 24 more waiting for me that say, you care more about the rights of the unhoused people than you care about us. And the thing that I always tell them is this helps nobody. This helped nobody, because all it did was push people. It hurt the people who were staying at the camps, and it's hurting the people near the camps now because folks are out in the community. They have no place to go. People don't disappear. They're human beings. And now you have, like you said, traumatized people who are just in other parts of the community, and it doesn't address the root issue, which is giving people a place to be, right? Like that's the root issue, is that people have no place to go. And if we don't address that, then none of us are okay. And so it's this weird thing that happens where homeowners and property owners will say, well, you care more about them than us. And I say, no, we all want the same thing, which is for folks to have a place to go. It's not that I want them to live next to a freeway or under, all that stuff. It's like that they need a place to be, or else all we're doing is hurting them and hurting the community around them when we do things like this.
I think that the difference, is that there's the difference in humanizing folks experiencing homelessness, right? Because you read, go on Nextdoor, go on Facebook, read the shit that people say on fucking Twitter, and it's all of this toxic, homeless people are trash, put them in jail, they're all drug addicts, all of this shit that the difference, I think, it's not that we all want the same thing, because if we all wanted the same thing, we would recognize the human right to housing. We would recognize the humanity. We would allow the humanity in ourselves to touch the humanity in the people who are suffering life on the streets of Sacramento because of systemic injustice. And that's not to say that there isn't an argument to be made to connect to people who have those very radically different viewpoints. But I think I struggle with saying that I want the same thing as the asshole on Nextdoor that's commenting on, District 4 stuff and, saying essentially fuck homeless people, because I don't want the same thing as that guy.
Well, that's fair. And I think there is an extreme subset. And I do say subset because I think what's happening in the pandemic is we're in this echo chamber of social media, right? And when I go out into the community, I did a backyard meeting in Boulevard Park down the street from me. And, there was a resident there who said, oh, well, most of these folks aren't even from Sacramento. And before I could even respond, 4 other residents from my neighbors were like, that's not true. And I was like, oh, that's right. There are a good number of people in this community who get it, that I've talked to today who get it, that they're moving people isn't a solution. If they're just going to move to another location, we need, there is no place for them to go. That's what we need, is we need a place for them to go so that they don't feel like they have to come back because they have the services they need, but there is a subset of people in the community who really do. And I know, because I've met a lot of them and I get emails from a lot of them who are just get them out of here, move them somewhere else, fence them up and don't let them out type folks. And those are hard cases, because you're right. I mean, I think that there's this level of just dehumanizing that's happened, but I guess I'm an optimist in that I like to believe that, the solution that all of us want is for people to have a place to go for the most part. But I will definitely not speak for 100% of the community in that. So fair point, Shannon.
I mean, I think I am the cynic on the show, but when Skylar's not here,
There's a void.
there, but
It's all sunshine and rainbows when he's gone.
yeah, I'm just over here singing happy songs. But yeah, I mean, I just and what I said what I needed to say, I guess. I'm
Okay.
like particularly frustrated with all of this. It's been so many years of trying to fight for change and get people inside, and with every sweep, with every death, with every person that arrives to where I work just suffering, it's like we're not moving fast enough.
Well, and it's really, I mentioned the emails and phone calls we get because like would be so easy for me to tell these folks what they want to hear, and to just like pass the buck and, so like, and not making excuses for colleagues of mine that are not doing a great job on this, but like, I like to hope that our office is taking on a little bit of the narrative change by not yielding to that pressure. They like move the camp, move the camp, move the camp. And I'm like, I appreciate that this camp is in a bad spot. We have a lot of camps that are in bad spots, and then we have a lot of folks on the street who need a safe place to go. And I would love to move them there. I need a site. I need a place to move them to. Give me help me, support me on opening these sites so we can give these people a place they can go and start their journey to hopefully becoming housed, right? And getting what they need. And so it is hard because a lot of what I get back is that's ridiculous, or do it faster, or that's not. And it's like, I mean, literally the number of neighborhood meetings I've been to where I just get yelled at for like an hour by people who really just want me to say, send in the cops. They're all criminals. Nobody wants to accept help. There's no choice here. It is hard because those are the loudest voices. And those are the ones I hear from every single day. And I literally say every single day. So I think that we need to hear more from the folks who don't think that way, because we're not hearing. And I can say for myself, in my own experience, maybe like twice, 3 times a month, I'll get an email from someone who's like, yeah, like, that's right. That's what we want. We want you to fight for sites. We want you to fight for shelter. But we're not getting any. I mean, and I'm sure if my colleagues' email boxes are anything like mine, it's like we're just getting hammered by people who just think that everybody's a criminal and nobody wants help, that it's hard sometimes to stick to that resolve. We're lucky that we have our strength and values that we have as an office, that we do that work. But it's why you start hearing these contrary things. One setting, someone says one thing, another setting, and then you get an email that says something totally different. And you're like, it's because it's easier. And they need to start feeling the pressure from those of us in the community who understand that moving people is not a solution, that sweeping people is not a solution. And in fact, it creates a lot of harm, and that we want them to do the real work. Otherwise, it's just never going to stop.
You talk about having resolve in your office, but I read something recently that said you were all unhirable bomb throwers.
Sloganeering bomb throwers. I said that's I'm gonna make that on a t-shirt, I think.
Yeah, and avowed democratic socialist. I mean, there is actually a part of me that wonders, and maybe I'm putting a tiny tinfoil hat on, why Caltrans started moving on this just 10 days after that push poll came out. And obviously we have nothing to work with there, but it does strike me as curious when Caltrans has been so quiet on all of this, right?
Well, we've been begging them to work with us on a solution for these very camps, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, sweep. And it's like, no, that is not what we wanted.
Asked for.
So yeah, it's all very sudden. And I know a lot of folks are trying to figure out why this call was made. And, I've put in a lot of calls today. This is the fun part of working in the legislature and being an advocate for as long as I have. Is like, I know people and I'm calling people and I'm saying, yo, like, help me figure out who made this call and why this was happening now. So hopefully we'll learn more in the next few days. But unfortunately, it's too late for us to stop what happened on W Street, which is why I go to therapy every week so that I can try to process how I feel about this constant injustice that we see every day.
Yeah. Can I also just go, Flo?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, you had the therapy, and I'm just so glad more of us are talking about it in public. So that's awesome. I, one of the things that really stands out to me, and I think in part because of the conversations that we've had on, on Measure U, is about the way in which it feels like a lot of the city's approaches to things are very disjointed. And so, what it has sort of risen to the top, at least for me, is the need for there to be some clear values and goals that the city has overall for its operations. And I'm bringing this up in part because I know we talk a lot about, policing on this show in particular, but I think one of the places when you were
We'll wait for her to come back. Flo, can you start over again from where did she leave off?
The police. You were starting to go into the police angle.
Yeah, so police are. I think my audio on here is going to be okay. So Skylar, sorry about this. But we talk about police a lot on this show, and police are city employees. And when the police department comes out with statements, that allege that people experiencing homelessness are criminals and don't want housing and all these things, it flies in the face of what we know to be happening. And so it leads to this disjointed approach where you have one department over here trying to provide services and trying to partner and really trying to use a more public health approach, and you have another department over here that is also under the city doing the exact opposite. And so I think it speaks to this need, and we've been talking a lot about this in Measure U, this need for the city overall to have some articulated values and approaches to things, because from the oversight committee on some of your tax dollars, it doesn't make sense for you to be pushing on one hand and pulling on the other. You're fighting against each other and you're wasting our dollars. But it also doesn't make sense in terms of, it's a little bit of whiplash around, like, what are we doing here? Are we rounding up a bunch of people who we've all deemed as criminals and trying to criminalize them? Or are we trying to provide services and, in this wraparound approach? Are we whole person caring, or are we, sending everybody to the county jail? And that's the part that's a little confusing. And so I think, one of the main places, an experience that I had, I was actually with Dr. Danielle Prince, who's with actually ACE's Connection, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences, right? And we used to walk on Wednesdays before the pandemic. And we were walking by, we were coming down Broadway, and there we saw the police getting ready to move somebody. It was raining outside, and this person had found some shelter on the side of the grocery store over there at the corner of Broadway and Stockton. And so we walked up to say, like, what's going on here? And the officer was like, and we were like, well, where are you moving this person? Is there a place for them to go? And say, all these people that you see out here who are on the streets, they're out here because they want to be, because there's plenty of places for them to go. And I was like, sir, that's not true. And he was like, they're refusing services because they're all strung out. And I was like, first of all, this person is standing right here, and I don't think we should be talking about somebody and about somebody's, circumstances with them standing right here. But second of all, what you're saying is untrue. And so at the time, there had been some community conversations with some of the officers, including those who were overtraining. And so I immediately picked up the phone and called Officer Stephen and said, I just saw one of your folks out at the corner of Stockton and Broadway spewing a bunch of nonsense. Is this what you're training them to believe? Because what they were saying is factually incorrect. And also, the dogma around it is just incredibly problematic. And I was like, I didn't like the way the person was speaking. I didn't like the aggressive tone he was taking. And what was happening here just didn't make sense. And I think from a city perspective, one of the problems is we're fighting, there's a lot of infighting because everybody doesn't agree on what the root cause of the problem is, how it should be framed, and what we should be doing about it. And that goes beyond policy. That goes to like articulating, what is the city are we trying to do and what direction are we moving in?
I'm really glad you brought up that example, because it touches on something else that we've been trying to work on as an office, which is understanding what the police response has and has not been. So for example, right, like I live in an apartment, I have a second story window, and there was somebody who was sleeping under an awning behind the building next to me. And so the windows were open, and I hear the officer come say, hey, you got to go. This is private property. You can't sleep back here. And what he offered him was a lift to loaves and fishes. And I'm thinking, okay, that's not shelter, you know? And I think this narrative that PD puts out when they say someone refused services, when they say, do you want services? What they're offering is a wait list, right? Like what they're offering is a phone number. And I know Shannon could go on and on about this. They're not offering, and people on the street know that. So there's that level of harmful narrative. But another thing that's been happening that's really harmful is we've had a lot of businesses and residents contact us because something urgent has happened. There's been a crime committed, somebody's getting hurt, somebody was hurt, something's going on, and they're being told that police won't respond because it's related to someone who's unhoused, right? And that's something that I don't promote, right? Like I don't want that crisis to occur, but it does feel like when DCR isn't ready to do real-time response and you say, sorry that you're injured, or sorry this thing happened to you, but we're not coming to help because they're homeless or experiencing homelessness, excuse me, like you're setting up a system where everybody's now like angry at this alternative system before it was ever given a chance to stand up. And that's not okay.
What, 5 employees right
yeah.
now?
And they're doing Herculean work right now. Like I'm telling you, like Bridget's team, when I've called them, when I've really like, oh my gosh, something really bad is happening. Like if they can, they do everything they can to try to get somebody out there to help me. But it's like, they're setting it up for failure. And then there's this whole thing of like, well,
3% of these 5 people of all 911 calls.
Yeah.
I also want to say, like, I think there can be discussions around how well they're doing, what needs to be fine-tuned,
absolutely,
like that. But like, it's being set up to fail right now, and the narrative
absolutely
is being laid out.
And why would you say that to somebody, right? Like, gee, I'm sorry, a crime was committed against you. We're not going to respond because we're not supposed to anymore. And I'm just like, wait, what? Like, that like why would you're setting them up for failure? And so there is a whole thing. And so there's this really subtle thing that's been happening where you may have noticed we have this log now of requests from council that we approve every meeting. And one of the things I've been asking for is I want clear guidance with the PD logo, with the code logo, with the DCR on it that says when you can and can't ask someone to shift, right? Like, so Boise decision, all of that, like I want it written down somewhere that you can't ask somebody to move unless they're blocking public right of way or there's some sort of urgent safety, like you're on the edge of the road, something bad has happened. Like I want that to be clearly defined so that it's out there and we have a tool where we all agree. Because I hear from constituents that are like, oh yeah, I call code on that RV that someone was living in and they issued a 72-hour notice, so it's fine. And I'm like, what? Like they're not supposed to be doing that because it's just, and they're like, yeah, but then the RV came back in 3 days and what the heck's up with that? And I'm like, because it wasn't a solution. You know, we need to all get on the same page, like you say. And so there are those discussions literally just started like 2 weeks ago between like PD, DCR and code about like how this is supposed to work. But in the meantime, all this stuff keeps happening in 63rd Street and other places. And it's like, it's whack-a-mole. So the best thing I tell constituents is like, let us know when these things happen, because like we're collecting that information so we can bring that back to the city management team and say something's wrong because you told me that people respond regardless. And then this person is telling me that a cop in the field told them that they won't do anything to help anybody. And that's not okay. And so we need to ground truth this because it's such a big organization. I think it gives people a lot of room to sort of avoid that accountability. And that's something that we're really looking to build evidence on. I'll just name that outright.
Can I take a step back, bring it around to Shannon, who, don't look surprised, Shannon. A long time and very good friend of mine, and I've seen a lot of these struggles really manifest like in you and your responses to them. And we've had many beers over the years discussing them. And your frustration it's so warranted because you see that pain every day. I just want to give you like another moment to sort of put this frustration out into the world, because this is some maddening fucking shit. And I know that this week has been kind of heavy on you.
Yeah, and okay, thanks. I think that the most important thing about about all of this is to decenter my frustration and center and amplify the pain and trauma that is being felt by so many people experiencing homelessness at the hands of both the city and Caltrans. What I will say is that when sweeps like this happen, there is a degree of connectedness then to people like myself, where we are like the helpers, right? The folks who are doing the mutual aid work, the people who have set their careers in the helping profession. And it is overwhelming that we spend so much time in service of our neighbors experiencing homelessness, only to watch our local government completely trash all of their belongings, these things that we give them for survival. And it adds an extra burden, right? Because all of a sudden now you have people showing up and saying, all of my stuff was thrown away. And how do we keep up with that? It's really hard when a person has experienced such a trauma to have to look at them and say, like, I've run out of tents today, or I've run out of blankets, or I don't have the thing to give you. Maybe try this person. But I also know that that person or that agency is completely overwhelmed because there are a number of sweeps happening. So at the end of it all, it really is this intense cycle of injustice and of just hemorrhaging resources that don't have to be. Instead, time and energy could be used on looking into like the systemic issues, addressing those and building up solutions to those issues, right? And I guess the last thing I would say is the timing of all of this is so fucked, because we've started to experience a dip in nighttime weather. We talked on the last show about how harmful, like what the impact of that could be on a person's physical health. You're leaving people without blankets, sleeping bags, tents. We're going into a time when people die on the streets. Last year we saw 30+% increase in the number of people who died in the colder weather months. Like these power and control moves, like the power over people bullshit, like actual lives are at risk. And that is what's important. Like, I'm absolutely frustrated. I'm burnt out, but it's not about me. It's about the people who, like yesterday and the day before, had to figure out where the fuck they were going to sleep.
Right. Maurice.
Yeah.
And 94-year-old Becky and everyone out there.
But there is, I think, like, sorry, I know I said I was done, but I'm not. But there is, I think, I'm an asshole cynic, like 98% of the time. But I'll step into my 2% of the time when I'm not being a shit and say that there's so much that comes from watching people stand up and amplify the causes of social justice and call in to meetings and send emails and get on Twitter and, you know, boost wish lists and needs lists. And I think that it's something that for someone like myself who at the end of a workday gets home and I'm just like, I can't do anything else today. When I start scrolling through Twitter and see how many people there are that are also that just like give a damn and are doing the work, I am like, my black heart swells. And I guess, I don't know. So that's a long-winded, like, jerky way of saying, like, community is dope. And I'm so grateful for it that when one person in our community is hurt, everybody rallies around and is like, all right, let's do this and figure out a way to take care. So like the community care in Sacramento really does give me, you know, it makes me feel my feelings.
Good. Well, let me talk about a couple things coming up where folks can have the opportunity to show up. And Councilmember, maybe you can kind of dovetail into, you know, kind of your strategy with Caltrans and CHP in the future, because some of this is happening, you know, within your district, even if it is on state property. On Monday, October 4th at 8 a.m., Caltrans and CHP are planning to roust and terrorize the unhoused folks around 29th and G. So everyone is encouraged to go out and show up for them, documenting their behavior. You know, this horrific behavior by Caltrans is really important. I think what Sac Red Meals did, tens of thousands of people saw it, and that made a difference. It did, you know. On October 15th, I learned from Chelsea, there's another planned sweep from, she was told that by some folks at a place where they were doing a distro. There is, I don't want to get too much into the details on location. I want to like respect people's safety, but this will be around the Fruitridge Florin area. And as we get closer to it, we'll let folks know how they can show up for them too. And yeah, Councilmember, what are some final thoughts for you on what can be done with this Caltrans thing, this sort of offensive that I don't think any of us saw coming?
Yeah, no, we didn't either. I got that email this morning. That was, I think the subject line was closing the loop, with all the details around what they were planning. And you saw city staff immediately respond and say, wait a minute, we knew there was an issue. We didn't realize you were doing that this soon. No outreach has been done to those folks on 29th Street. And I'm not going to contest that they're not in a bad spot. You know, these are folks that are living right next to a really high traffic road. There's some folks that are blocking the sidewalk. Like, there needs to be some work done with them to help them find a safer place to be so that they're not in danger. Part of what Caltrans is citing is an increase in pedestrian deaths in that area, which they do believe in some cases have been unhoused folks. And so, but there was no effort made with us to try to do that. It's just like, well, you're unsafe here, so we're gonna move you somewhere else, without giving them any alternative. And you know, I have a lot of fears, and we're working really hard behind the scenes to try to slow that down. Not because I think that's a great spot for folks to be, but because I don't think sweeping people when you don't have an option for them of where they can go is humane or effective at what they say they're trying to achieve. So we're working really hard to try to get them to work with us and to open a site so that we have a place for those folks to go and can work with them to get them there. And I'm hopeful we can make progress. But the big thing, like you were saying earlier, is Caltrans needs to hear from you all about their responsibility to do something for these folks, not to these folks, because what their response is, they're getting inquiries from people who are saying, what are you doing to help these folks that are on this road? And their response is to sweep. And it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. You've got billions of dollars in your budget. You've got lots of access to land. You can work with local jurisdictions like the city to safely relocate folks someplace like we did for the WX Safe Ground. They know how to do this. They're just choosing not to this time. And I can't answer why, because all I got was the call was made above me type answers. But I can tell you that they need to hear from you, that this isn't okay. This isn't a solution that's actually meeting the need of anybody who lives around those sites or in those sites.
They're targeting your district.
They're targeting my district.
Weirdest thing about
and can I just say that, like, not only did I not know, but I found out that another council member has been the one pushing this. And so I am going to name Councilmember Jeff Harris in this incident, because he has been the one working with Caltrans to organize this sweep. Because the minute I sent an email saying, whoa, wait a minute, you need to delay this because we don't have a relocation plan for these folks. And why are you doing this right now? Like, we've been asking for months, right? I'm going to keep repeating myself, but like literally for months, we've been asking Caltrans to work with us to help the folks on their property. And like, suddenly we get, this is happening tomorrow. And what I got immediately thereafter was a bunch of constituent emails from District 3 saying Jeff Harris's office says you're trying to block the removal of camps, blocking kids' route to school. Is that true? Which is a horrible mischaracterization of what's happening here, and also completely just ineffective. And the fact that a local elected is doing that is just horrible. And he's doing it in my district, and he's going to push and these are my constituents too, right? I know people like to say, like, you need to care about the folks who vote. Like, I'm sorry, the folks who are living there on 29th Street are my constituents too. And they deserve what we know how to do, which is how to safely and humanely move people someplace where they can get services. So like, the fact that we're not doing this, that we weren't given the opportunity to do this when we were asking them for the opportunity to do this, is horrible. And it was really fueled by Councilmember Harris's office, as well as folks at Caltrans. I find it pretty unacceptable that he's meddling in our district in such a harmful way.
Yeah, it's unconscionable. And I would like to ask Jeff how close he is with Jonathan Brown, the pollster. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I mean, we're a little bit over, so I guess maybe this is a good place to stop. Does anybody have some final thoughts?
I mean, it sounds like we're asking people to write to Caltrans, to write to Jeff Harris, and send him some bow ties that are screen printed with fucking turds on them. And
that is what I personally asked. Yes.
If you would please send him horrible bow ties. And then I think, like, we're over now, but Councilmember Laloe laughed at a public comment made by PJ when he called in and was talking about the sweep that happened on Tuesday, where a 94-year-old woman's tent was taken up by a claw on her birthday. And for one, applause to PJ for not allowing the mayor's anger because he said the word shit. And of course, Daryl just can't have that. So the mayor gets pissed. PJ just, like, bulldozes right over that. But at the end of the comment, when PJ is talking about this 94-year-old woman's tent, ends his public comment, and Sean Laloe is laughing at the public comment. That's the guy. Come on. These like monster elected officials.
I will
Anyway.
say,
Right to them all.
yeah. And I just want to say that I've been planning a new tattoo with my friend Zima soon. And what I want my tattoo to be is the Marian Kaba quote that hope is a discipline. And I want hope as a discipline because I say that because I don't want us to lose hope that change is possible. You know, I said to 2 or 3 different people today that I want to believe that it's harder right before you break through the wall is when it's the hardest on you physically and mentally and spiritually. And what you said earlier, Shannon, about our amazing community and how they step up. And I do believe that there are more of us than there are people who don't see folks living on the street as human beings who are traumatized and need our help and need our solidarity. I think there's more of us out there who want to fight for that change. And I do think for all the chaos, that part of why it's picking up so much right now is because we're getting closer. And I like to think that,
100%.
and I hope that you keep pushing with us and keep staying loud because this is the moment that they're trying to get us to give up. That's why I know I've got 24 emails. It's like half of these are troll emails, I think, because it's just like, what is this? Like, how are you sending all these emails? It's because they're trying to wear us down. And this is the moment we got to lean in and really push. So that's my sort of addition to that call to action. Don't lose hope. Do what you need to do to fuel that fire and keep it burning.
I've got some moles in the places of power in this city, and those folks running these machinations are terrified, and that means we're winning. We are winning.
Yeah. Why do you think they did a push pull on us? You know, it's just like, I took that as the ultimate compliment that like, oh, okay, we're hitting the nerve somewhere. And I think this is it. I really do. And I want to push for the solutions. And I think we're getting closer.
Cool. I think we need to end it. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Councilmember Valenzuela, for coming on last minute. I guess that's it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Let's call it a night. Let's let these folks on Friday just enjoy our voices.